Before sunrise, Rio de Janeiro is still a field of scattered lights. Above the sleeping city, a figure stands inside the clouds with both arms open. From below, Christ the Redeemer looks solid, silent, almost weightless. But hidden beneath its skin is a hollow concrete world built by people who were told their dream was impossible. Most visitors see the view, take a photograph, and leave. Almost no one imagines the narrow passages inside the monument, the ribs of reinforced concrete, or the workers who once climbed into that unfinished body while Atlantic winds struck the mountain. The true wonder is not only what stands outside, it is what had to happen within. This story begins before the famous silhouette existed. In the 19th century, Corcovado was already a dramatic summit rising above Rio. A railway opened the mountain to visitors in the 1880s, carrying passengers through dense forest toward a peak more than 700 meters above the sea. The mountain seemed to ask for a monument, but the idea came and went for decades. Brazil became a republic, politics changed, and proposals disappeared into drawers. Yet the dream survived among people who believed the summit could carry a symbol visible across the entire city. By the early 1920s, supporters had begun raising money through public donations. This was not the private fantasy of a single wealthy patron. Coins arrived from ordinary families, church communities, and people who would never stand on the scaffolding but wanted to place something hopeful above Rio. Engineer Heitor da Silva Costa was chosen to lead the project. His earliest proposal looked very different from the statue we know. Christ held a cross in one hand and a globe in the other. It was meaningful, but from a great distance the details would disappear. Artist Carlos Oswald offered a clearer idea, open arms forming a great cross against the sky. The gesture could be read from miles away. It was not an image of conquest. It was an embrace, broad enough to belong to the whole city beneath it. The simple outline created an enormous engineering problem. A human figure 30 meters tall was difficult enough. Two arms stretched horizontally across nearly 28 meters would behave like giant cantilevers, catching the wind with no support beneath the hands. On a calm drawing table, the shape looked graceful. On Corcovado, it would face rain, tropical heat, salt carried from the ocean, and violent storms. The head leaned forward, the arms projected into empty space. Every elegant line increased the load hidden inside. Heitor understood that beauty alone would not keep the monument standing. He traveled to Europe to find sculptural and structural partners. In France, he began working with sculptor Paul Landowski, whose task was to give human form and emotional restraint to a figure larger than a building. Landowski could not simply carve a 30-meter statue and ship it across the Atlantic. Instead, he produced studies and a 4-meter model. The head and hands were developed at full scale, then divided into transportable sections that could travel by sea to Brazil. Imagine the strange sight inside the workshop. A face taller than a person, a hand wide enough to become a room, and technicians measuring curves that would later be enlarged on a distant mountain. A tiny error in Paris could become a visible distortion above Rio. The final face was shaped with help from sculptor Giorgio Leonida. Its expression needed to remain calm in hard sunlight and deep shadow. From close range, the features could seem massive. From the city below, they had to resolve into gentleness. Then came the invisible hero of the monument, French engineer Albert Caquot. He designed the internal reinforced concrete structure, a hidden skeleton capable of supporting the statue's weight and the bending forces created by those enormous outstretched arms. The choice of reinforced concrete was daring. At the time, it was still a relatively young material for a monument of this scale. Steel could form a frame, but concrete offered a way to create the complex cross-shaped body while enduring the mountain's exposed climate. Inside the statue, Caquot designed a lattice of columns, beams, and bracing. The monument would not be a solid block. It would be hollow, with its strength concentrated along an internal framework. That empty space reduced weight and made later access possible. This is the secret most photographs never reveal. The serene figure is also a carefully calculated building. Within the torso are levels and narrow stairs. Passages rise toward the shoulders, and maintenance access continues into parts of the arms and head. The public does not tour these spaces. They were made for construction and care, not sightseeing. In photographs from inside, the surfaces feel raw and close. Concrete surrounds the visitor, while small openings reveal sudden pieces of sky far above Rio. But before anyone could climb inside, every material had to reach the summit. There were no helicopters lifting ready-made sections into place. The Corcovado Railway became the project's lifeline, carrying cement, tools, steel reinforcement, water, stone, and workers up the forested slope. Each journey demanded patience. Loads had to fit the narrow mountain railway. Weather could slow work without warning. At the top, space was scarce, and the drop beyond the construction area left little room for mistakes. Workers assembled scaffolding around a form that did not yet look like Christ. For years, Rio saw a changing geometry of platforms, beams, and concrete. The monument grew from the pedestal upward, one difficult section at a time. The torso created vertical weight. The shoulders created something more dangerous, leverage. As the arms extended farther from the center, gravity pulled harder on the unsupported ends. Wind could twist and flex the structure in ways the naked eye would never notice. Caquot calculations had to anticipate those forces without modern computer simulation. Engineers relied on mathematics, drawings, physical models, and experience. The calm final pose was made possible by thousands of decisions hidden beneath the surface. The head presented another challenge. It tilts slightly forward, moving its center of mass away from the main vertical line. That small gesture makes the face feel compassionate, but structurally it behaves like a heavy load leaning out over the city. To the designers, every artistic choice had an engineering price, yet reducing the pose to something rigid would have destroyed its meaning. The collaboration worked because the sculptors respected structure and the engineers protected expression. One can picture a worker standing inside the unfinished chest, hearing hammer blows echo through concrete. Outside, clouds crossed the scaffolding. Below, Rio looked impossibly distant. He was helping build a face he might never see properly until the structure was complete. The monument's outer skin created another puzzle. Bare concrete would weather unevenly and could appear harsh. The designers chose soapstone, a material valued for durability, softness during shaping, and its subtle ability to catch changing light. The stone was not applied as large slabs. It was cut into countless small, triangular pieces and attached as a mosaic. From a distance, they merge into a pale, continuous surface. Up close, the statue becomes a field of tiny human-scale decisions. Women helped prepare the soapstone pieces, fastening them onto strips of cloth before installation. Accounts connected to the monument remember that some wrote names or private messages on the backs. Whether seen or not, those marks turned the skin into a quiet archive of hope. That detail changes the way the statue feels. The exterior is not merely decoration. It carries the touch of people whose names never appeared on the monument. Millions look upward, unaware that intimate gestures may be facing inward, sealed between stone and concrete. The pieces also solved a practical problem. Small tiles could follow the complex curves of the robe, fingers, and face better than large panels. If one area was damaged, restoration teams could work locally instead of replacing an enormous section. Construction continued through difficult conditions on the mountain. Rain made surfaces dangerous. Wind crossed the open scaffolding. Materials moved slowly. There were no wide staging grounds, and almost every task happened above a steep forested landscape. The workers' safety record became part of the project's legend. Building at that height with the equipment of the 1920s demanded extraordinary discipline. The absence of a famous catastrophe does not mean the work was easy. It reveals how carefully people approached the risk. By 1930, the body was largely complete. The head and hands were assembled from transported sections. Suddenly, the scaffolding contained recognizable features, and the shape imagined on paper began to look back at the city. For those involved, this must have been the emotional turning point. A calculation became a shoulder. A shipment became a hand. A rough concrete tower became an embrace. The impossible project was no longer an argument. It was standing. The monument was inaugurated on October 12, 1931. Crowds gathered while the new figure rose above clouds and forest. It was 30 meters tall on an 8-meter pedestal, an Art Deco landmark positioned at one of the most dramatic urban viewpoints on Earth. Yet the opening did not end the engineering story. A monument on Corcovado is never finished. Heat expands materials. Water finds cracks. Wind pushes against the arms. Lightning repeatedly seeks the highest exposed point above the city. Storm photographs sometimes show bolts striking the statue. The image looks supernatural, but the danger is physical. Lightning can damage fingers, head surfaces, and protective systems. Maintenance teams inspect the skin and restore areas exposed to the mountain's relentless weather. This is why those hidden passages matter. The hollow interior allows trained workers to reach structural areas, wiring, access points, and sections requiring inspection. The space that made construction lighter also helps the monument survive. Inside, the scale becomes unsettling. The body that appears smooth from Rio is divided into functional levels. Ladders and steep stairs turn the monument into a vertical workplace. The visitor no longer sees a symbol from afar, but concrete carrying enormous forces. Near an arm, a small opening can frame the landscape like a secret window. Outside is bright blue air and a city reduced to patterns. Inside is gray structure, close walls, and the knowledge that only a thin, engineered shell separates the worker from the wind. The contrast is the heart of the monument. Its public meaning is openness, but its survival depends on a hidden network. What seems effortless from below is the result of reinforcement, maintenance, calculation, and repeated human care. Restoration creates a delicate question. How do you repair an icon without changing the face people recognize? New soapstone must be selected for compatible color and texture. Small differences become visible across a surface watched by millions of cameras. Modern access equipment makes some work safer, but the mountain remains difficult. Technicians still operate in exposed conditions. They're the latest members of chain that began with donors, draftsmen, railway crews, sculptors, engineers, and mosaic workers. There is also a lesson in the monument's international creation. A Brazilian engineer led the vision. A Brazilian artist helped shape the pose. French and Romanian sculptural expertise refined the form. A French engineer designed the internal skeleton. Brazilian labor raised it on Corcovado. The statue became unmistakably linked to Rio, but it was built through cooperation across borders. Its identity did not become weaker because many hands contributed. It became richer, carrying several traditions inside one clear silhouette. And there is a deeper reason the open arms worked. The earlier design, with cross and globe, depended on objects. The final design depended on gesture. A gesture can cross language. Even people who know nothing about its construction understand welcome when they see it. From the city, the arms appear almost perfectly horizontal. From nearby, the surface reveals seams, curves, repairs, and weather. Perfection at a distance is created by thousands of imperfect pieces working together. Perhaps that is why the hidden interior matters so much. It reminds us that endurance is rarely smooth. Strong things often contain bracing no one applauds, empty spaces that reduce the load, and quiet people who keep returning after the celebration ends. The monument's fame can make its builders disappear. We remember the finished photograph, not the worker guiding material from the railway. We remember the face, not the hands cutting soapstone triangles. We remember the embrace, not the calculations preventing it from falling. But every iconic structure is also a community of invisible decisions. Someone checked a measurement twice. Someone waited for safer weather. Someone rejected a weak solution. Someone carried one more load uphill when the summit was still wrapped in scaffolding. This is where the story becomes personal. Most lives will never produce a monument visible from space or recognized around the world. Yet the same principle governs families, neighborhoods, and acts of kindness. What lasts is often supported by work nobody sees. A teacher stays late. A mechanic repairs something without charging. A stranger contributes a small amount to a dream larger than any one person. These acts resemble the hidden framework inside Corcovado, unseen from a distance, essential to everything above them. If this story has changed the way you see the monument, tell us which hidden detail surprised you most. The hollow interior, the railway, the cantilevered arms, or the tiny soapstone mosaic. Your answer may help another viewer notice the people behind the icon. And if you enjoy true stories about the courage, ingenuity, and kindness hidden inside familiar places, consider subscribing. This channel is for the moments history almost forgot, the quiet human choices that made the impossible real. Tonight, when the clouds move across Corcovado, the statue will seem to appear and disappear. The city will see only the outer figure. Inside, the concrete skeleton will continue carrying its enormous burden exactly as its designers intended nearly a century ago. The railway will bring new visitors. Maintenance workers will watch the weather. Cameras will capture the same open arms from 1,000 angles. Most people will never enter the narrow internal passages, and that mystery is part of the wonder. Because the greatest secret inside Christ the Redeemer is not a hidden chamber or forgotten treasure. It is evidence. Evidence that imagination needs engineering, that beauty needs care, and that a symbol can be built from millions of small contributions. From one piece of soapstone to one line on a structural drawing, no single part could create the monument alone. Together, they formed something that outlived its builders and became a promise above an entire city. The impossible was not conquered in one dramatic moment. It was measured, carried, cut, poured, checked, and repaired. It was made possible by people whose work vanished beneath the surface, and whose achievement still opens its arms over Rio. But before we leave the mountain, there is one more way to understand the achievement. Imagine entering through a maintenance opening after the tourists have gone. The noise of the viewing platform fades, replaced by footsteps, close concrete walls, and wind pressing softly against the shell. The interior does not resemble a grand cathedral. It is practical, narrow, and unfinished because no audience was expected there. Its beauty lies in purpose. Every beam answers a force. Every landing makes inspection possible, and every opening serves the survival of the monument. Moving upward changes a person's sense of scale. Outside, one sees a single body. Inside, the figure becomes architecture, a vertical sequence of spaces held together by reinforced ribs. The enormous robe is no longer an image. It is a load moving downward through calculated paths. Near the shoulders, the engineering becomes even more dramatic. The arms reach sideways while gravity pulls them down. The internal frame must carry that bending force back toward the central body, much as the structure of a bridge transfers weight toward supports. This is why the pose feels impossible. Human arms contain bones and muscles that support themselves. These arms are massive concrete cantilevers exposed to weather on every side. Their apparent stillness is the visible result of an invisible argument with gravity. Wind adds another argument. On Corcovado, air does not simply pass around the statue. Gusts strike the broad surfaces, change direction around the torso, and place unequal pressure on the arms. The structure must remain stable when the calm silhouette enters a violent atmosphere. Rain brings water toward joints and microscopic cracks. Salt and pollution travel through the air. Temperature changes make materials expand and contract at different rates. None of these forces is dramatic in a single moment, but decades turn small movements into serious questions. That is why maintenance is not cosmetic. Replacing mosaic pieces, sealing vulnerable areas, and checking structural conditions protect both the appearance and the concrete beneath it. Preservation is engineering performed with the patience of restoration. Technicians sometimes work suspended against the monument's exterior, appearing tiny beside a finger or fold of the robe. Their photographs reveal the true scale better than any measurement. A hand that seems elegant from Rio becomes a cliff when a person stands beside it. Lightning protection is equally essential. The summit makes the statue a natural target during storms. Conductive systems are designed to guide electrical energy safely, but severe strikes can still damage exposed pieces. Afterward, teams must inspect what the city cannot see from below. Each inspection continues the original collaboration between imagination and responsibility. The builders of the 1920s created access because they understood that monuments age. Modern teams use that access because admiration alone cannot preserve concrete, stone, and steel. There is humility in this cycle. Even a world-famous icon depends on routine work: checking, cleaning, documenting, repairing, and returning. Greatness does not eliminate maintenance. It makes maintenance more important. Perhaps this is the final hidden lesson inside Christ the Redeemer. Open arms suggest a single timeless gesture. Yet the monument survives only because generations accept responsibility for something they did not begin and will not personally finish. The donors who gave coins, the workers who rode the railway, the artisans who touched each stone, and the technicians who climb the monument today are separated by decades. Still, their work meets inside the same structure. So when the statue appears above Rio at sunrise, remember the hollow passages, the concrete ribs, the quiet repairs, and the countless hands behind the surface. What looks like one impossible object is actually a long chain of ordinary people choosing to care.